Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. As you can see on the screen that's up right now, today's talk that I'm going to give is it's about Artisan residence programs. So I'm kind of gearing it as half and half. The first being kind of a how-to about Artisan residence programs, what they are and where they are and how one participates in them or how one chooses which ones to attend. And then the second half, depending on how much time there is, I'll get into some of my own personal travels and journals and some of the stuff that I've made during some of these residency programs and my experiences that I've had during them. So anybody here, so show of hands, ever attend an Artisan residence program? And anybody here think they might ever want to in their life? All right, great, okay. Okay, so gotta decide which one to use here. What is an Artisan residence program? So Artisan residence programs are kind of, I always look at them in a way like they're retreats, but they're also, I kind of call them safe havens in a way. They're places where artists can go to focus, to have a set amount of time or a block of time where they can focus on nothing else if they want to but their work. And they exist all over the world, and they exist in all different kind of levels, which I'll get into in just a few minutes. But basically they're places where you should know that you can go as an artist where you are supported and encouraged to just have time to do your work. And the next page I have up here is where can you go to find information on them. So if you think you're interested and you have no clue, you just know that, hey, I would love to have a chunk of time where I could just go hang out somewhere and be focused and do what I want to do and get away from everything else that's happening in my life. Where can I do this? So the place to go find out about them, on the web, there's 3 great resources. One's called Trans Artists, one's Res Artists, and one's Mesart. And if anyone wants afterwards, instead of making a bunch of paper copies, if you're interested, you can just email me and I can email you these links back. And my email is, you can just find me easily through the Scripps website, but it's adam.davis@scripscollege.edu. There's also 2 books. When I first graduated, as I date myself, when I graduated, I got my graduate degree in '99. The gift that my mentor gave me was actually a book on, the first one, was The Artist Community as the Director of Residencies. I think since then there's been at least one new edition in 2005. I'm not sure if they actually publish the book anymore because now it's so easy to access the stuff on the internet, whereas before it was very difficult to find. So now the internet, I think, is the easiest way to go. But the book is a little bit better in the sense that it breaks everything down in every possible way you could ever want the information. It shows it to you by discipline, it shows you by time, it shows it, not only does it show you how to find them, but it shows you the statistics usually listed on them. So it'll say, this residency usually has 500 applicants. Out of the 500, they pick 2. This one, usually it costs this much, whatever. It just has a more thorough listing, whereas on the line, you'll usually just find the address where to apply to, kind of thing. So basically, you just know to yourself, like, either, hey, I want to do a residency here in California, or I want to go to Japan, or I want to go wherever, and then you go to these residencies listings, and you can usually break it down by continent, by country, and then once you're in there, then you see the whole listing, and then you start to filter through, okay, I'm interested in one that's for creative writing, I'm interested in one that's for painting, then you get into that category, and then, okay, I'm interested in one for 2 weeks or a full year, I'm interested in one that's free, so on and so forth. Besides Artist Communities, there's this new book that's recently come out, We Love Artists, Artisan Residencies Around the World. And it's a little more, it's not as comprehensive. It's whoever put this book together has kind of picked, it seems kind of willy-nilly, whatever ones they had either attended or knew someone who attended and just compiled them and had lots of nice color pictures. But it's still a good resource. It's not as comprehensive as the one before. Okay, so how do they differ? So you're trying to figure out which one do I want to go to, what do I want to do, what do I want to get out of it. So there's the application process and fees. The application process is pretty straightforward. It's the same that most artists confront, for visual artists at least, that you confront anything you're going to apply for. So if you're applying for graduate school, you're applying for shows, usually they're asking for a CV, an artist statement, your portfolio, which usually consists of 20 images. More recently, over the years, they've been cutting that down. Sometimes now it's only asking for 15 images or asking for 10 images. It used to standard be 20. And then your image list, and sometimes a bio. So it's just like anything, you put together your normal artist packet that hopefully you, and again, I'm sorry, the talk is really geared towards visual artists and residence programs. I think that's what I know best. So they ask for those standard materials, you send off the packet, and then you kind of say your prayers to the residency gods, I guess, and hope you get in. Fees we'll talk about a little bit down the road, but some of them actually have an application fee, and some of them have a fee to be in residence. And you all have to, of course, make the choice yourselves of whether that's something you want to do. But my general advice, especially to people who are younger and students and starting off in the career, is that you don't apply to residencies that charge a fee. Same goes for applying for shows if they have a fee. Anything that's charging you to be accepted is usually not a good idea, because it's costing you a lot of money for who knows if you stand a chance. And also, most people know that attached with a resident, if they know that program and that you paid, everyone knows, like, oh, you paid to get there. It wasn't necessarily that something that you got on your validation, on your own accord, but that you maybe kind of paid to get. And so they rank a little bit differently in people's minds when they're trying to figure out, that they're trying to validate your career, I guess you might say. But that's not to say that there aren't residencies out there that cost money that you shouldn't do. It just depends on where you're at and the stage of your life, what they cost, and what you're getting for the money, kind of thing, like anything in life. Location we talked about, you try to figure out not only where in the world you want to travel. Are you interested in staying abroad, or going abroad, or staying local, but also issues of where you live now and what you want to experience. If you live in a very urban place like LA and you really need to be out in the woods and just be really quiet for a while, that might be what you're looking for. If you live in a really rural town and you really want to go somewhere where there's a hustle, bustle, and energy, because that's going to fuel your work in some sense, that might be a good choice too, of course. The length of stay, it varies from a residency to residency, but for the most part, the shortest ones I know of are usually 2 weeks, which for me is way too short. I can't imagine going somewhere and you're just settling in and then it's over. Some people like that. Not for me. I found for me, my quote-unquote sweet spot for residencies is about a month to 2 months max. The most I've ever done one is 3 months, and that one particularly happened to work out well, but most that I attend in a month, I'm pretty good and ready to go. So you just always have that thing of you don't know where you're going and it's a mystery, and if you only have your summer off and it's a 3-month residency and you're locked in there and it's not so good, you're there that's your whole summer, right? So it's always you're always taking a bit of a risk, let's say. So anyways, the normal periods of time are 2 weeks, a month, sometimes 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year. There's probably maybe a few residencies out there that are maybe 2 years, but for the most part, a year is the long end of it. I would say most people do a 3 month. I'd say 3 months is about the most popular length of time that residencies usually run. Accommodations, again, this all depends on the residency program, but for the most part, almost all residencies out there provide a place for you to stay. They have the accommodations for you. There are a few that don't, or that would charge a fee for the accommodation, but usually if that's the scenario, they have some kind of a network or friends of the residency program, so that when you get there, you're not just going to the paper or Craigslist or wherever blind. They say these people are living in our community and they support the residency, and they usually rent out a room or their basement or whatever. Contact Joe or Susie. They're wonderful. They've been with us for 20 years, and they'd be a wonderful basement to stay in as long as you don't mind their cat or something like that, right? So that's usually how that goes. Stipends, some of these, I'll get into this as we keep going, some of these actually pay you as well. So not only are they wonderful kind of safe havens that let you go there and give you a place to live and a place to work, but on top of that, some will even pay you. They'll say, come on down, hang out in the forest, do your work for 3 months with no one bothering you, and we're going to pay you $500 or $1,000, whatever, a month on top of it. There's some real dream scenarios out there. And then on the opposite end of it, there's ones that say, come out here and pay thousands and thousands of dollars to use our space, right? So it's, again, it all comes down to what you're looking for, what you can afford, and so many factors play into it. The facilities and the discipline are kind of intertwined, of course, that if you're a painter, or let's say you're a sculptor and you're going somewhere that's set up for painting and they have no power tools, they have no wood shop, they have none of the stuff, it might not be the best residency for you unless you're looking to do something completely different, right? So obviously keep in mind when you're looking for something that you ask them ahead of time, I'm a printmaker, do you have a printing press? Do you have what I'm going to need, right? Or is there that in the community? Is it not there in-house, but very close? Do they have a connection with another organization that has those facilities you need, and can they make that network for you? And then again, support and assistance, of course. Some of these places, and most of them I would say, I've found are, you get there, they hand you the keys, and they say, have a good time. Because they're under the impression that you want to be there and not to be disturbed and do your work. They don't want to be hounding you and bothering you and trying to have people come visit you and talk with you. They try to be very respectful and say, if you need anything, come see us. Otherwise, we'll see you in a month or 3 months. It's like being dropped off on the island kind of thing. So you just have to make sure that the support and assistance is there, because if you're using a lot of equipment, what happens if that equipment breaks? Is someone going to come fix it? It's going to take them 2 months to come fix it, and then you're sitting around in the middle of nowhere waiting for these tools to be fixed, and they might never be. Or just as far as just having a guide in the town. You're in this new possible town or country, you don't speak the language, who knows what, and how how helpful are they as far as trying to introduce you to other people, networking you with other artists or galleries or museums or just good places to go eat or all that kind of stuff. So hopefully as you try to think about these, you start talking to other past residents, you look at who's been there before, you contact them through email, things like this that are kind of common sense that help you gauge if this is a place that you think you actually want to be or not. Okay, so we're already addressing this a bit, but I'll get into it a little more here. So what is your goal when you're going to this residency? One of the main ones often for people is, of course, the research, that you're going somewhere specific because it's in a town or an area that has something very specific that you're interested in, whether it's the location or there's an archive there for some kind of academic research or whatever it might be, that the research is driving the choice of place. It might just be that you like to travel. I found that as I get on in my life and being a professor, my main times to have a stretch to concentrate and work are over the summer. And being that I also love to travel, and that's the time for travel, I found that Artisan resident programs work really well and that they allow me to do both, that I can go some other part of the world that I've never seen before and have new cultural experiences, and at the same time be there doing my work for an extended period of time where I can really cut everything else off and get really focused, and then have this also wonderful benefit of all these new cultural things kind of filtering in as I'm making the work, hopefully in an ideal situation. Some of you just might be the time and the focus, and part of that residency program is that when you go somewhere and you're not at home, all the crutches that you have at home are taken away from you, and that's what's wonderful, is that I find that I can work at home for 3 months straight, but I'm going to spend a lot of that time emailing, I'm going to hang out with friends, I'm going to be going to my favorite restaurants, I'm going to be doing whatever kind of things that I like to do when I want to procrastinate. But if you stick yourself in the middle of nowhere where you don't have all of your toys and all of your tools and all the things that make your process easy or how you normally do your process, it's going to force you into uncomfortable zones that are going to make new things happen. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy about the residency, is it puts you in a scarier place, I guess, quote unquote, in your work, and usually I find that fruitful 9 times out of 10. Career advancement, professional opportunities. I was just talking real quickly to my colleague Susan Rinkaitis here about this, is that a lot of students, they get out and they're just thinking, like, I want the biggest. I want to go for the biggest, the best. What residency program out there has the most notoriety? Because I'm trying to, jump through the hoops and advance my career. And so they'll go for the biggest, the residency with the most clout right out of the gate, and they won't get there, and they'll be applying for years and can't get into a residency program and can't figure out why. And it's not to say that for some people that works out. It just depends on what your goals are and what you want to achieve or what you want to get out of your residency. If your goal is career advancement, then you might want to try to go to a residency that has more clout and is more renowned, in which you know that there are famous curators going to and visiting the artists, or that they're cherry picking and watching who's coming through those artists and residence programs, because that's where they're trying to find who to give the next show to and who to give the next grant to. And so they're looking for these already kind of validated programs out there in the world where they can find who's supposedly already risen to the top versus kind of bottom dwelling or doing the work on their own or on the streets, so to speak, right? So there is that opportunity at these higher end residencies. So it's just a matter of, is that what you're looking for, or are you looking for just a really nice quiet time somewhere out, out in the middle of nowhere, and or just getting a chance to travel in a part of the world you've never traveled before, and at the same time getting to make artwork. The next one, this is most common for students, is postponing the real world, quote unquote. So you've gone to school, and then maybe you've gone to graduate school, and now you're like, oh my God, the bubble's popped. I don't have this network that I've had for the last 6 or 7 years or something like that. What do I do? Now I gotta get a job, I gotta go wait tables, everyone said this was gonna come, everyone always warned me, I'm never gonna have a studio again, blah, 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 so on and so forth. I don't wanna move back into my mom and dad's basement. The residency program, it's like, that's for a lot of people the next escape. It's like the next institution that they can just slide right into, that for a while longer the real world doesn't exist. And the great thing is, especially at that stage, that's where you're looking for the year-long ones, right? You want to get them as long as you can. It's like the perpetual student. You want to be in there forever. You get the year-long one, and then you start networking. There's all these other residents there who are doing the same thing. Where were you at before here? I was at so-and-so. Oh, let me, and that network starts, and you go another year, and next thing you know, 5 more years have passed, and you still haven't had to deal with a real job, quote-unquote, and all that kind of stuff. The really wonderful part about being a younger person going through this process is that of course, as you all have probably been told or know, is that all these things get more difficult to do as you get older, right? You have your family or kids or your mortgage or who knows what, that it's not so easy to all of a sudden disappear for 3 months, 6 months, a year. What's going to happen to your house? What's going to happen to your pets? What's going to happen to your kids? Who's going to pay the rent? Who's going to pay the mortgage, right? But when you're just out of school, you're 24 or something like that, coming out of grad school or even undergraduate, younger, all this stuff maybe hasn't racked. You don't have possessions yet, right? You have your laptop in your dorm and your immediate 7 days worth of clothes or something. It's like all you have when you leave here at Scripps. That's pretty easy to pack up and go with, right? Your house, all of a sudden leaving it for a year, and your kids is not so easy to do, right? So the younger you are, the easier it is to transition to that and just keep it rolling. And it's a wonderful time to do it if you can be on top of it and are interested in this kind of opportunity. And a lot of people do go that route for a few years. Okay, and then the last one we talked about is the networking, right? Is this a residency program where you're the only one there? Or is this a residency program where there's 15 other residents and you're going to get to know all of them and meet all of them and connect with them? And then when they all go out into the world and they all get their jobs at wherever it may be, maybe professors, maybe work in a museum, who knows what, you have that connection to help you with your career, right? Or just obviously the friendship connection or the travel connection. It's not all about the career. Other considerations. We talked about the surrounding, the urban versus rural, right? Do you live in an urban place and want to get to somewhere quiet? And do you live in a quiet place and want to get to somewhere bustling and a little bit crazy with energy? What do you need for stimulation? The time of the year, big factor depending where you're going, right? I've done one of my residencies I did was in Norway in the middle of winter. I never was depressed in my whole life until that. I understood for the first time what like deep depression was. It was kind of nasty. India in July, if you love rain, monsoons might be really great. If you're not a rain person, maybe you don't want to go, there at that time of year. So always try to keep all that stuff in mind when you're doing the residency, because usually you're just like, I'm applying anything and everything. Whenever they take me, sure, I'll go. And you get there and you're like, what did I do? There's no sunlight and it's just snowing for 3 months straight. Well, this was not a good idea. Dietary concerns, if you're like me and have all kinds of crazy dietary concerns, if you go someplace, for the most part, I think most places in the world have fruits and vegetables, and hopefully everyone eats fruits and vegetables, but if you have above and beyond concerns, make sure whatever you need is in that place you're going to, of course. And then your transportation of the work and yourself is a big, big factor. That if you're a sculptor, traditionally, and you're trying to go abroad to make work, how are you going to get that work back home, right? That's a big cost. It's a big cost to ship stuff locally, more or less across the Great Divide, right? So that either tells you you're not going to go to a place abroad, maybe do sculpture, or it's a really good opportunity for you to try expanding your practice that we talked about before. Maybe I should go somewhere and try something totally different, totally new, photo, video, who knows what, something flat, drawings that I can get back home. So these are nice kind of challenges you can set for yourself to create kind of transition zones in your life and your work. And then, of course, is the transporting yourself part of that, which is, how am I going to get there? Does someone pick me up? Am I in the middle of nowhere? Do they provide a bicycle for me if there's no transportation or bus system so out in the middle of nowhere? How far is it to the nearest grocery store? Am I going to have to walk 5 miles, or is it right there on the corner, right? All these questions you have to start asking yourself. Okay, so that really concludes the nuts and bolts portion of what I have to offer and things for you to think about in trying to choose your Artisan Residence program. And now I'm just going to kind of get into I think 7 of them that I've done in my life so far, and just kind of give you a bit of a travel journal. I'm not going to show you all my pictures like my scrapbook kind of thing, but I'm just going to kind of focus a little bit on where the institutions were and maybe show you a piece or two I did there and that kind of thing. And then hopefully if someone would be willing to give me like a sign when I'm at like 10 minutes left for questions, that way or when I'm coming close so I can wrap it up, that'd be great. Okay, so this is the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts in Hull, Montana. Arguably one of the best artisan residence programs for ceramics. If you're in that field, it's a clay-specific residency. So when I got out of graduate school and I received my MFA, I was focusing solely on ceramics, and it was logical or made sense to me that I wanted to go to an all-ceramic place. And I did this one for 3 months. This is 11 years ago or something like that. And at the time, none of this was built. This whole building, all this stuff, none of this was there. It was really, quote-unquote primitive compared to these facilities. And it was a free program. They didn't provide housing, but they had the network, so they connected me with someone in the town who I lived in his basement, for $150 a month. And I worked for 3 months, and it was a really wonderful experience. Everyone was really supportive. It was great. When I was in the town, I also had I had to work a job in addition. Hopefully, you can get to a place where you don't have to work on top of your artwork. But I had to work to pay the the rough $150 a month rent and my food. And so I took a job working in a grocery store part-time, and I was also working in a Wayward Home for Pregnant Teens. And so before I had gone there, would I have any idea that I would wind up in the small town of Helena, Montana, working in a Wayward Home for Pregnant Teens? Like, there's no way that I could have known that when applying for this. But I got there, and it was, kind of like one of these massive, life-changing experiences where you're hanging out with 12-year-old girls who are pregnant or about to have their kid, and seeing what that's all about and how they go through that, and documenting and watching that process, and sitting in on Al-Anon meetings with them and hearing their stories of their life, and all this kind of stuff that's, really heavy, stuff for anyone to deal with, first, second hand, third hand, whatever. And I thought I was just going to work with clay kind of thing, So you're going to get the residency experience, and most likely there's going to be some other mass component, like anything when you show up somewhere and you don't know what you're in for. So, now they have fancy facilities, huge. We just got our new facility here, which is just dwarfed in comparison. They have rooms as big as our new building, workroom for just kilns alone, this kind of thing. So it's a really wonderful place out there in Helena, Montana. The next one I did was at the Clay Studio in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and it's in the heart of Philly. It's right near the water, in this really wonderful neighborhood. They're in a high-rise building. Right across the street from the residency is the apartments that they provide for you. In addition to it being free and free housing, this one at that time, I can't remember now, 10 years ago or something like that, there was a $500 stipend attached to it as well. So in addition to getting to do your work, they were paying me as well to be there. So it's kind of like one of those dream scenarios. Get to do what I want, get to be in a new city, get paid, and make artwork. The only drawback that I can remember to the Clay Studio was the time there was a rat problem in the apartment I lived in. So every time I came home, there were little chocolate chips all over the place, and that was kind of gross. So again, you never know what you can look at it on paper, but it's not until you walk in and they go, oh yeah, and by the way, we got a rat problem. So yeah. They probably don't like the fact that I'm telling this. Now, this is a long time ago. I'm sure they figured out the rat problem in the last decade. I was unable to of course, when you're doing these things at the time, you don't always remember to take pictures. And when I was younger, I wasn't really thinking that I'd be here giving a lecture on Artisan Residence programs at one point or at some time. So here's here's not the part where the individual guest artists work, but they also are community-based programs. So here's where the community can come and take classes. They have a really wonderful thing. They have the clay truck, or I can't remember what they call it, the clay van that goes out in the community, goes into schools or neighborhoods, or schools and neighborhoods that have less resources, and they do like a bookmobile, basically, like the Claymobile, that's what it's called. And they show up with clay for the day, and they work with the kids, and so they have a really vast network throughout the city, and they do really wonderful stuff. And this residency, I think I was there for maybe 2 months, I want to say, 2 or 3. No, actually 1. I take that back, I'm sorry. I was there for 1 month. And again, I had a really great experience. I think this had about 3 residents at a time, 3 residents in-house, whereas Darcy Bray had something like a dozen, at least, I think, over the summer. The next one, the first one I did abroad, was at Lademann Kunstnerwerkstätte in Trondheim, Norway. This picture I gleaned off the internet. It's not my own, but this is whoever took this one. This is the shot from the apartment where I used to stay, looking at the residency program across the street. So this residency program was in an old school building, and so this wonderful old school was where the residencies were housed, and they also housed full-time artists. Rented those studios full-time, and they had 2 or 3 that they left open for visiting artists to come in, and it was bleak. It's beautiful, but bleak. I found it a little rough. One of the greatest things in the school is all little kids, and walking up the stairs in the schools, they had them all march in like this single file line because they were little kids and that kind of thing. And if you looked in the hard concrete floor, there's actually little divots exactly all the way to the left from all their little footprints from the years and years of them all having to walk that same exact path that actually wore out the concrete. It was kind of crazy. And here's the accommodations. Again, this one was a free place to work, free place to live, no stipend attached, and they just kind of gave me the key and left me alone, and that was it. And I did this one for a month. And you can see this was actually the schools across the street, and then in the facilities, the woman there who was opening the door there was 2 residents at a time. When I was there was an artist from Ireland who was working downstairs, or living downstairs. I was living upstairs, and to the right is a gymnasium. So all day long we'd hear crazy thudding and flipping and all kinds of stuff as like these young gymnasts were training all day long in the winter. This is kind of your standard residency thing, like a box with IKEA furniture. It's kind of how it goes. And so there you can see the school across the street. This is from out my apartment window, looking at where I'd be working. And what was really wonderful, because it was there in the wintertime, is that the kids there, the big pastime is skiing, like the long jump, for long distance jumping, ski jumping, whatever the right name for that is. I'm not a big ski jumping fan, but you all know what I'm talking about. They jump down the whole hill, right? So this is what the kids do. They dream about being world-class ski jumpers. So they just take all the snow from the parking lot, they pile it into a giant mountain, and all day long I just watch them. They just make a line, they get to the top, and they just jump down the pile of snow. And they get back in line, and they do this for like 2 hours straight. Like they just sit out there, and it just never ends. They just keep jumping and jumping and jumping. It's hysterical. I should have made some work about it. I don't know. It was good. And here's the studios. Or it's like the kitchen is on the right-hand side, a communal kitchen, and on the left, one of the work studios. Another thing I forgot to mention, that in these residency programs, we talk about like these low-end residencies and high-end. The fanciest residencies, place to work, place to stay, they pay you, they feed you as well. A lot of them that are really nice residencies, you're looking at breakfast, lunch, and dinner served to you. Lunch, they come to your door and they leave a bagged lunch at your door, and they don't even knock. It's just there at noon, and you know it's there every day because they don't want to disturb the process. Nighttime, you get together, especially if it's a diverse residency where you have filmmakers and writers and visual artists. Everyone comes communally at whatever time. Every night you can come down, you have dinner, you have wine, and everyone talks about whatever in the world they want to talk about or they're doing. And you have access to all these quote-unquote wonderful, creative people who are sharing what's going on. And so they become these really wonderful experiences in communities if you go to those type of residencies. And here's this again, pictures from the street in Trondheim, Norway. It's a gorgeous town, it's very picturesque, but the winter can be a little rough. And I took a little trip. At this residency, I had no money at the time, and I remember I was on unemployment. So since our government is not so wonderful about sponsoring the arts, they don't see maybe the value in it so much. I went on unemployment. I took my unemployment check and I had someone sign my checks every 2 weeks in the U.S. and then send them to me in Norway, and that was my money to afford food and all that kind of stuff. So unfortunately, at the time when I was there, I didn't even get to go to Oslo. I didn't have the money to get there, but I saved up enough to just take a small trip to Ålesund, other small town, and this is me standing on a mountain in the middle of winter, looking out over the water, and again, I would never know that I get to see something. I can only hope I would see something like that upon going there. So even when the quote-unquote bad parts, there's always going to be something amazing, right? And they don't shovel snow. I never got it. I just couldn't figure it out. Everyone is walking everywhere throughout the city, and it just compacts and compacts and compacts. And you're watching 80-year-old women and men just slip and fall on their ass all day long, and everyone just accepts it like this is just part of life. I just couldn't figure out why they didn't shovel sidewalks. Everyone, it was a deterrent. It just enhanced the cabin fever because you were too scared to go anywhere because you knew you were going to fall 15 times before you got there. It's ridiculous. Okay, this next one is I did this 3 years ago, I think, and this is in Karleby, Finland. This residency. The place where I'm staying is they provided a flat that's right here on the water that goes through the small town, and this is on the midwestern coast of Finland, and the residency itself is about 2 miles away, and they gave you a bicycle, and you would just bike to your residency every day. And so here's my backyard, looking out over the river, and then in the residency itself, there was 2 residents, and you actually shared the same quarters. There's separate rooms, of course, but it was like a flat, like a 2-bedroom flat. And when I was there, I was roommating with this couple who were they were married, and they're video artists from Slovakia, and they were wonderful, and they really encouraged me or got me into doing some new things in video work that I'd never done before because they were able to show me lots of software tricks I didn't know. You can see they've got the skis, the cross-country skis, so I guess when wintertime comes and you got to make it to the studio, they provide those for you, I'm assuming. I was there luckily in summer. I don't know what, the auger, I don't know if that's for ice fishing, I'm guessing, maybe, if you want to go ice fish, I don't know. For me, the scariest part, you can see this was very humble quarters. You have to not mind sometimes where you're going to stay. That's my bed and my suitcase that I lived out of, my table for toiletries. That was my room. On the right, this one I was scared to death every time I took a shower because they had the classic kind of shower that you'll often see in Europe that you can basically shower yourself while taking a crap. There's no divider. You sit there on the toilet and you can turn the shower right on top of you, and everything just goes down the drain kind of thing. But the really dangerous part, if you notice, so right there, the right-hand corner is where you stand and shower. and to your left is the washing machine plugged in. And so you're standing in a puddle of water with plugged-in electronics right there. And even the couple from Slovakia, when we both got there, were like, this is so dangerous, we're going to die. And they're like, no, everyone does it, it's no problem. Don't worry, it's how it is in everyone's house. I'm like, okay. So I thought it was a bit scary. But I do like the method that everything, when you're done, you just wet the whole floor and push all the water, and it's a nice way to clean things up. It's smart. Okay, and so here's the trip I take on my bicycle every day. I got to go through the town. I get to see the wonderful water. I get to see the cute church, cross the bridge, right? The whole picturesque deal. Wintertime, I wouldn't want to imagine it. Summertime, really gorgeous. The signage there, I always love this. You see this sign sometimes when you're coming to or leaving a town. They have these great things that tell you, like, you are now leaving civilization. Like, good luck, right? So that was one of my favorites. And they were obsessed with these signs, just everywhere. Like the one on the upper left, they're like, no families. Like, and like they even warn you when there'd just be like a small. This wasn't like a huge like breasts or something on the road. This is just like. The road had a small undulation, just like barely, and there's like warning, like it's gonna do this just a little bit, you know. They were crazy. It was great. So you have these kind of wonderful things. These things all filter into like your visual, into the visual language, and then maybe they come out in your work. They have these really wonderful things for your shoes. In the wintertime, you just take your boots and you rub them through the broom handles on the left, and that's how it gets all the snow off. I was like, oh, that's ingenious. And then I guess they hit the Star Wars thing kind of sat with them. I think they still carbon freeze people like Han Solo. They're criminals or something, and put them in the park. It was really bizarre public sculpture. So I'm just trying to give you a little. I make this. It's lunchtime. I want to have fun. Right? Trying to jazz it up a bit. This is the surroundings of that residency. It's all forests. And it was all full of the glacial till that's around there. So you have all these forests with all these huge boulders. And it's interesting because it was a farming community basically all around there. And I guess the plots of land, the value of them is depending on how many giant boulders are in your land. So if your dad owns a chunk of land and only has one massive ass boulder that's unmovable, like that's a pretty good plot of land. It's worth a lot of money. If your family has the one that's got like 7 boulders in it that are unmovable, then it's like, oh, yeah, their family's got 7 boulders, you know? It's like, so it was interesting because you got to get around, when the truck or the plow or whatever has to come through, and you got to go, you know what I'm saying, get around the rocks. And so this wound up filtering into one of the pieces. I did 2 video pieces while I was there, and I also did a photo that wound up in a series. Oh, do I not have it? I moved it. I think it's coming up still, sorry. Here's the residency that you'd bike to. Again, the residency was at a school, and this is during the summertime, so the school was totally empty. So I had all access to everything that a normal university would have as far as their total art department, and it was all open and no one else in there. So it was like being in a ghost building, more or less, right? And it was just me and these other 2 residents, and we had the whole school to ourselves for the entire summer. I basically spent all my time in this little editing bay. I was just here in this little room, and I just sat there and I edited videos all day long, every day. When you do residencies like this, you have to be careful, or you have to remember that if there's nothing else in your town, there's no bar, there's no restaurant, or there's nothing in this town almost, right? That this is going to basically become art jail, depending on how you treat it, is that there's nowhere else to go. So 7 days a week, at least you're probably putting in, on a minimum, an 8-hour day. For me, I'm usually putting in a 12 or 16-hour day, and that's going to, oops, I hit something scary. That's going to be, 16-hour days, 7 days a week, you're making art. And so you're going to get an amazing amount done. You're going to do the equivalent of what you would normally do probably in a whole year, in a month or 2. But at the same time, it can be a little rough. You got to make yourself. You got to go out and find something to do in the forest, basically, or else you're going to go a little crazy. So I often find that for me, a lot of the time, the residencies, and I've talked with other people, that is kind of common. You start to often lock in if there's these kind of remote residencies where it can get kind of unhealthy, that you get so focused because you don't have the other things to entertain you. And then here's this is part of a series of work, photographs, in which I was dealing with these couplings they were kind of metaphors for difficult relationships on some level. And so I was interested in using the forest there and the bears. I did a couple of work pieces with bears. And then this young kind of urban homeboy-ish kid he's just having an interaction with the bear out in the woods like anybody would.
That's a real bear?
That is a real bear, but this is all being photoshopped. So the woods I shot, and then the bear I stole the image of and photoshopped, and then the boy comes from, all these weird things people upload on the internet. I found an image of people who like to take pictures of guys who wear the saggy pants and their butts are hanging out kind of thing. So I was doing Google searches for a long time trying to find just the right image of a guy with his butt hanging out of his pants. And there's an image of two guys working on their car, like someone. It's one of these things where you don't know who took the picture, why they took it, and then who put it up on the internet for the world to see. But it's like the hood of a car open, and like two guys just like working on the car, like dressed like, you know, with like their rears hanging out, like they're in full saggy style while doing auto mechanics. Anyways, I don't know. It was just the right image, and this is what you all get. And then the video work, they had green screens. They were mostly they were a heavy video program. The people that I was there with from Slovakia, their deal was they remade trailers for movies using only themselves. So at the time they had already done Taxi Driver and they were working on Pulp Fiction, and it's just the two of them, and they play every character in the movies. So they take it frame by frame and they reproduce the entire thing. Like they're filming it in our kitchen, they're filming it on the streets, but they just are photoshopping everything. And so every single person, if you like a car goes down the street and it passes 15 people on the street, they superimpose themselves in and they become every 15 of those people. If you pass a billboard, they're on the billboard. If you know everything, they play every single character, and it's this, you know, crazy meticulous work. The funniest thing was they showed me when they did Taxi Driver. In the trailer for that, if anyone has seen or remembers Taxi Driver, there's the thing where De Niro's doing all the push-ups, and they got so tired from doing the shots again and again of the push-ups that he wasn't strong enough to keep it up. So like using like green screen tricks, he just set up the wall where he was doing push-ups like this way, so like he could keep taking more and more takes. So they were really great. It was a really wonderful experience to meet them and work with them and all that. Another great thing is you never know who you're going to meet. A woman who was at the residency program, she had relatives who had this little cabin out in the middle of nowhere in like some archipelago, and she invited us, you know, the residents down. So we went there for a weekend, and you know, it's this really secluded place. You get out there, there's no electricity, there's no nothing. You got this little cabin, and there's this awesome little sauna at the end of the pier. And all we did all day long for a couple of days is you just sit in the sauna. The sauna is split, so it's like one half sauna side, one half where you can just sit and eat and read books, and you're looking out over the water or in the stars or whatever. And basically, you just play this game. Is what they just kind of do all day long. Is you sauna. You get out and you can't take it, and you eat and read your book for a while, and you jump in the freezing cold water, and then you get back in the hot sauna, and you read and eat, and you just do this for 8 hours until it's time to go to bed. And you just do this for a few days, and it's amazing. I highly recommend it to everybody. Sculpture Space, this is in upstate New York in Utica, and at this point I was like, okay, I want to go back. I was doing a lot of video and digital work at a lot of these residencies abroad. I said I want to come back to do some large sculpture work. And so I'm going to stay in the States, and so I went to Sculpture Space because they were well equipped for sculpture, and I was interested in doing some pretty tall things, and I needed coming to, is it like a 5-minute or a done warning?
Oh, like 5 minutes.
5 minute? Okay. So I knew I wanted to do tall stuff, and so I had done this bed piece while I was there. It's about 12 feet tall. You can see it goes rafters. So here it is while it was almost done, but still in progress. And then there's the finished piece on the right. And so there's the stack of 5 beds, and then there's a line of sight or a hole drilled through all the mattresses and all the beds that runs all the way up, so that there's a flashlight under the very bottom, and then it shoots a beam of light all the way through to the top. And so you can kind of see that when you're in the beds, you can see how the light runs through it, and how you can look all the way down through to see the person under you, or when you're laying in the very bottom bed, the bottom left shows you the line of sight all the way through, looking up through each bed. And I had to go on Craigslist and find everyone's nasty, disgusting pee-pee mattresses throughout the town in order to get 5 affordable mattresses. So like that was my upstate adventure, was like just hoping no one killed me when I showed up in their like farm out in the middle of nowhere and picked up their nasty mattress. It was, who knows why they were trying to get $5 for it, you know. I also did this, they were place that wasn't set up for ceramics, but they did have one small kiln that was like in the corner all dusty, and I kind of did some repairs on it, made it work again. And I did a small ceramic piece where I made these pigeons, and you can see them, in progress. And then here they are once they've been finished, quote unquote. And then the installation for them is, again, with doing these tall pieces that they're on a shelf that's way up in the rafters of wherever they show, and the ceiling's painted so it looks like there's access to the sky. And they have these kind of rope ladders of cobbled string and stuff like that, so you can kind of climb up to them, and hopefully they offer you a ride or whatever it is that they're going. And then I had a piece that I'd made before that wasn't so successful, and I wanted to revamp it or come back to it. They needed a new home, and so I made this vitrine. I really got them like, okay, this is a really good chance to do some serious woodworking, and so I built a vitrine for it, for these pieces that I had from another show, and so they became the home for these ceramic pieces that I've made in the past. Okay, so I know I'm totally running out of time here. There's the Jordan Residency. blah, 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 wonderful, it was amazing, awesome views. There's so much stuff I could talk about, but we're kind of out. And so here's the first sculpture supposedly ever made in the world. They supposedly have it. This is what it looks like, first human made. There we go. Now you've seen it. Okay, I'll end with this real quick. This is my last one I'll talk about. So while I was there, I was looking at power lines. This is kind of some of the most recent work. I didn't know what I was going to do in this residency, and I was looking at power lines the entire time I was there and just taking pictures of them. I knew that I was somehow interested in power and communication. I was thinking a lot about the region and how important this is, being in the Middle East. Anywhere, of course, but there especially. Call to prayer happens, of course, 5 times a day. It's right outside your window. It's starting at 4:30 in the morning. You're constantly thinking about spirituality and religion and how that's kind of forced upon you, whether you want it or not, living in that community. At the time, my father just passed away before I'd gone there. My mom was really sick, is really sick. And I was reading a lot about string theory. And so I didn't know what I was going to do with this residency. I was just wandering the streets taking pictures of power lines for a long time until it all started to come together. And then I realized that through Photoshop, I started putting all these power lines together to make these giant contraptions to become like these transmission devices. So I did this series. The photos are only what you see on the left. The right is just at a detail, so you can see because they're big and you can't tell on digital what's going on unless I blow it up. So there's these crazy intricate objects that I've made that hang in the sky. So they show as a finished series of prints. And then after that, I'm like, this is not quite here. There's something more still in this piece that I need to do. And so I started doing some traveling, and I'm going to skip these. There's some water wheels that were also transmission devices, and then they make these crazy sounds, and kids ride on them. This was in Syria. Sorry, I know I should have went faster. In the end, So, and just finishing this up. So, in its finishing state, what I wound up doing is realizing that I use these as overlays in time-lapse video of the sky. And what I did is I went around and asked people throughout my travels this one simple question, which was, have you ever tried to send a transmission from beyond the physical universe as you understand it? And have you ever tried to receive, or have you ever received a transmission from beyond the physical universe as you understand it? So I have about 50 people answering in about 25 different languages, edited those all together. And the way that this properly shows is that you're in a room. It's a 4-channel video installation, so you stand in the middle, and on every wall surrounding you, these are much larger. And these things bob and weave. The total loop of the audio is something like 40 minutes, or 30 or something, as they say. Well, yeah, 30 minutes. 30 minutes of audio of listening to people tell their stories in all different languages of what their transmission is. For some people, of course, it's ghosts, it's religion, it's communing with the dead, it's all these kind of things. So there's still another residency after this in Spain, but I'm sorry I ran out of time. Questions, comments?